Well, just uh, just go through those back taxpayers of each and every state of the United States that has a state income tax. Yes. Now, I think it's a manifest injustice that each and every state is liable for the full faith and credit of the United States Constitution. Yeah. And their individual National Guards would not obligate the state of Washington to enforce the rights of citizens, and that affects the taxing authority of each state of the United States. Now, you keep saying, I will never be able to do what I say, Poe, but I think I will. Now, you costing the states their National Guards because the National Guards would not defend the state constitutions. What gives the states the constitutional right to have sales tax? No. Income taxes. Oh, they have a taxing authority that is constitutional. Ooh, ooh, ooh. Now, I know you don't think that I have any right to divorce my wife. Yes. When our marriage certificate is from the United Nations and it was NATO that asked the United Nations to be there. This whole marriage, right? The legal union of a couple as spouses. The essentials of a valid marriage are, yes, parties legally capable of contracting to marry. Did you know that our marriage certificate from the United Nations is a contract between two adult American citizens? Yes. And violating the contractual obligations of that certificate, yes, when you didn't protect my right to get notice of court hearings, violates the international laws known as contract law. Now, this mutual consent or agreement that we had when we got married in Kosovo, yes, we both signed it. Oh, it's a contract with the United Nations enforceable because of NATO. Now, if we looked at all the other individuals that had United Nations marriage certificates, this state, right, and this county decided that they would dissolve a United Nations marriage certificate without any due process to myself, right. They would obligate me to child support. Yes. They would remove my custody rights to have custody of my sons. Yes. They wouldn't enforce my victims' rights or resources. Yes. And they would violate the international contractual obligations of the United Nations to be a non governmental peacekeeping organization. Oh, why don't you get me every location for the last 60 years where the United Nations was asked, yes, from NATO, Pooch, or any other nation of the world to be the governmental organization, yes, that had the right to issue marriage certificates, Pooch, birth certificates, yes, and death certificates. Now, the state of Washington doesn't feel an obligation, but I would say that when you invalidate, as in you gave a dissolution of marriage to my wife, yes, and you didn't protect my rights as the respondent. You violated the contract law between the militaries of the world and the United Nations. Yes. Now, I can make this so fucking big. Yes. I can get every marriage certificate that's been issued in any nation of the world when they were or were not a nation during any sort of humanitarian problems, some sort of natural disaster. You know, when they have a refugee issue, an earthquake, a typhoon, a tsunami. Now, when I get to sue in each state of the United States for not obligating their National Guards to enforce the full faith and credit of their individual constitutions, I sue their taxing authorities, yes, and then I sue them, yes, for having the knowledge of the fraud of giving a dissolution of marriage without any validity at all. I'm going to sue each of those states for violating the international contractual obligations of the United Nations between any country of the world or any military. Now, these international associations of militaries known as the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, there's more than just Europe, isn't that right? Yes. Maybe Africa has a similar type of situation. Why don't you get me every place in the world that the United Nations was a non-governmental organization that issued marriage certificates where every state of this great nation has to enforce the full faith and credit of Washington State issuing a dissolution of marriage where I didn't receive any protections at all. Yes. And they decided to violate the international obligations of every nation to enforce United Nations. A different way of looking at it, but when I explain the lawsuit, it's $1 trillion day. Not only is there the fraud of the full faith and credit of the VAWA, yes, there's the fraud of the dissolution of marriage, pooch, where every nation of the world has to go through the same processes of dissolving a United Nations marriage certificate. No one is exempt from not recognizing the United Nations. Now, I'm going to sue each state and their taxing authority for not.